now the movement has many other shapes and forms and colors and threads to it. And it makes it a sort of pulsating, crazy, gyrating blob of an amorphous structure, which now we have the potential to sculpt, collectively sculpt, I think, into a broad social movement, a popular movement for change. And the process of sculpting that power together is going to be the next challenge for our movement.
Let's talk about decentralization. Occupy seems to be more and more centralized. A lot of people criticize that and think there should be a more centralizing movement going on, tying it all together. What do you think about that?
This is a tough one. There's always been a tension. It's like the yin and yang of Occupy. Autonomy versus consensus. Centralizing versus decentralizing. Unity versus solidarity. You know, these notions, I think, are a false dichotomy. Because in reality, you need both. We need to, for example, centralize communication. Not in the sense of all communication flows through the same group of people, but centralizing the tools and the structures that will enable us to open up communication and to facilitate a tightening of coordination amongst our global network. So there is a certain amount of centralizing there. There's also a lot of decentralizing that has to happen. Decentralizing finance and fundraising so that our movement can continue to sustain itself and not have to rely upon a small group of people to bring resources into the movement. So there's areas of centralization, there's areas of decentralization, and then the notion of autonomy and consensus. What decisions should be made collectively versus what decisions should be made independently, by groups or by people, individuals. Because some of the most bold acts at Occupy Wall Street, in fact, I'd argue almost all of the most bold acts, were autonomous actions. They were not consented upon by the General Assembly or by any governing body. They were clearly autonomous, and many of them were quite unpopular in the beginning. The tents that came up in Zuccotti Park were not put up by the consensus of the General Assembly. There were 3 days of argument about those tents and whether or not they should go up. And finally, after 3 days and 3 nights of bickering and arguing, a small group of people autonomously decided to put up the tents in the park. And those have become a symbol of our movement. And so you see that autonomy can breed beautiful things for the collective when people have trust in each other and build trust between each other. And then at the same time, there's a certain amount of consensus building that I think is important. And so we mold and we sculpt our future based upon what proportion of the two we use. And it's not really the decision, I think, of any particular person or body of people, how we should organize it. What we do need are principles of solidarity, statements of intention, our mission, our demands even. We're evolving as a movement to the point where we can actually already make amazing demands upon people in society, people in power, and we have successfully. And so what demands of the future will look like is an amazing conversation that's happening right now.
Can we talk about leaders in a leaderless movement?
Another tough one. Everyone has the capacity to become an amazing leader in this movement. That's what's so enticing to many people about Occupy Wall Street and the Occupy movement, is that there's an immense capacity for leadership building. And that is exactly because there's no single leader. There's no single privileged board of executives or directors that run the game. And whenever we get to the point where people start to feel that there's too much bureaucracy or centralizing of power, there's a natural tendency, which is great for us to cede control, to resist the temptation to consolidate power. Because in reality, the new global power will be not in who rallies behind this or that man. It will be in who rallies behind this or that technology, this or that idea. this or that network. It's really in networks that power is accumulating now. If you don't agree with me, think about the state of our sort of global nation-state system. It's in decay. We see around the world, in the developing world, we see democracy emerging in some form or another, and it's contested and it's struggled. And then in the so-called developed world, we see democracy eroding. We see the structures that we thought were democratic now becoming corporatized, becoming privatized, becoming commodified. And a democracy cannot exist in that kind of environment. It can't exist in a state of such inequity and injustice where it's only a democracy in name alone. And the real decision-making is done behind closed doors by private elites. And so the networks are where the power is at. The people networks, the information networks, that's where the real power lies. And those networks that for so long have been dominated by large institutions like banks and media conglomerations and multinational corporations and agro-industries, those large institutions are falling apart. Like Julian Assange says, we're burning them to the ground every day. And we're doing that through these insurgent tools like Facebook and Twitter, and repurposing corporate structures and repurposing corporate tools to use them to demolish the inequities that exist in our society. And it's a very dynamic time. And so I believe that when you talk about leadership, to get back to your original question, when you talk about this notion of leaderless movement, it's misleading, because it isn't a leaderless movement, it's a leaderful movement. It's a leader-building movement. In some ways it's like a classroom, Occupy. It's a space where people's minds can be expanded and they can move beyond the typical old notions of right and wrong and left and right, and conservative and liberal and progressive and all of these terms that are becoming archaic now because the whole political spectrum is shifting, you know. I guess to sum it all up, there's a quote that I love which says that technology is more important than government. And whether you like our government or not, you have to acknowledge that technology is changing government. It's changing the very structure of governance, both civil government and also movement governing, the governing of our own movement, and how we'll self-govern it, how we'll auto-organize, self-organize our own structures of decision-making and consensus building and autonomy. Those structures are where the power lies, and we'll build those collectively together.
What direction do you think Occupy is going to take in the next year, let's say?
I see in the spring a reemergence of the fundamental energy of Occupy, the anger that brought us to Zuccotti Park. And it wasn't just anger, but it was righteous indignation, like the Indignados movement in Spain. I see a reemergence of that in the spring. And we'll be a much more mature movement at that point, because we'll have been through Occupy Sandy. We'll have been through Strike Debt. We'll have organized debtors against creditors. We'll have organized working people, poor folks, against the oppressive structures of our city government, of our police system, our so-called justice system. We'll have organized our own communities, our housing communities, our work communities, our cultural and artistic communities. And we'll come out, I think, in the spring with a beautiful sort of reemergence from that hibernation that we experienced last winter, which I think we will experience in a way this winter. But I think this winter will be a winter of community building. Whereas last winter, I think, was healing from the pain and the suppression by the police. This winter will be a sort of less healing and more of a growing of our strength and our solidarity together. And I'm excited. I think that Occupy has expanded much beyond Occupy now. It's not, you can't contain it. The Walmart strikes, the low-wage workers who are rising up, the dream actors who are demanding citizenship and to be treated as equals. All of these broad movements, social movements, are converging together on this same notion, the notion of social justice and the notion of fairness and equality. And it'll be exciting to see what happens.
Thank you.
Thank you.